This lecture covers Chapter 5 and is designed to introduce the learner to the problem-solving and decision-making processes. The day-to-day operation of the laboratory requires strong leadership and management. It is important that the laboratory be responsive to any problems that arise and impede the flow of test results. Problem solving and decision making are interrelated. Problem solving is the process of identifying and defining the problem, determining what happened to cause it, and what steps or possible solutions will be necessary to solve it. Decision making, on the other hand, is the process of choosing among several alternatives. It may or may not be the result of an immediate problem, but is usually very goal oriented. Problems can be structured or unstructured. Structured problems tend to be routine, recurring, and involve an almost automatic process. They have a high degree of certainty with regard to outcome. In contrast, unstructured problems are non-routine, non-recurring, have an uncertain outcome, and require new and often unique solutions. This slide lists the 5 steps in the problem-solving process. In the laboratory setting, a common complaint heard from individuals outside of the laboratory is the time it takes for a laboratory result to be generated and returned to the patient's chart, called turnaround time. In the laboratory, technologists may believe that they are completing the laboratory tests in record time. But from a nurse's or physician's standpoint, when patient care is the primary concern, the time may seem much too long. The manager must define what ideally should be happening, how long should it take to get a test result back, and where the discrepancy lies. Is it really taking too long? Is the problem pre, post, or during the analytical phase? It is important that the problem be clarified from the information received before proceeding to the next step. Managers must determine the actual problem and avoid looking only at symptoms. By using actual data as well as individuals' perceptions, the manager will get a clearer picture of the real problem. Managers often leave out this step and jump to conclusions without understanding the root problem. Failure to accurately identify the root cause is one of the major reasons why a solution that is tried is unsuccessful. It is often advantageous to invite individuals from outside the laboratory situation to discuss the issues in order to give an outside perspective and insight into the problem. Step 3 in the problem-solving process involves establishing criteria on which potential solutions will be evaluated. Clear specifications of what the decision has to accomplish, what minimum goals must be attained, what objectives the decision has to reach, and what conditions it has to satisfy must be determined. Ideally, based on the definition of the problem and analysis of its cause, only one objective should be set that any acceptable solution could attain. If the problem is too complex to set only one objective to meet the goals, another means for establishing criteria to evaluate proposed solutions is to make a list of musts and wants. Musts are those basic requirements without which the solution would be unacceptable. Wants are those qualities that are desirable in any solution and should be assessed according to their priority. By identifying them early, the manager can avoid solutions that waste time, and money. Next, the manager must develop appropriate solutions to really solve the problem. This is where managerial decision making takes place. The classical model of decision making assumes managers have access to all the information required to reach a decision and that they can make the optimum decision by easily ranking their own preferences among alternatives. It is hard to develop creative alternatives, so managers are encouraged to look for ways to obtain new ideas. A win win solution wherein both parties feel good and feel committed to the decision and action plan is what should be strived for. To achieve this takes more than time. It takes patience, self control, and courage balanced with consideration. The final step in the problem solving process is to put the solution into place. Often a decision is made and not implemented. Feedback must be built into the decision to provide a continuous testing against the actual experience and the expectations that underlie the decision. This feedback must test the validity and effectiveness of the decision against the actual course of events. Managers must consider what went right and wrong with the decision and learn for the future. Without feedback, managers never learn from experience and may make the same mistake again. This process occurs in step 4 of the problem solving process. The speed in which a decision must be made will vary based on the problem to be solved. Effective managers must make both quick as well as complicated decisions by drawing on their own experiences, reliable sources of information, good sounding boards, and a fairly clear sense of purpose. The worst case scenario in this process may be that not making a decision is worse than making a poor decision. At other times, the decision requires more information to be gathered, more input from others, and lots of alternatives generated and evaluated. Even though making decisions are the most important activities that managers engage in, individuals are generally amateurs when it comes to making the right decision. Because of the numerous internal and external influences that exert pressure on an individual, many hidden traps can be found in decision making. A manager should become aware of these perceptual and behavioral decision traps in decision making situations to actively avoid them. An example of this trap is a sales representative giving a price for a product or new instrument and what the contract for the commodity would be. The manager then comes back with a counter offer, which is usually somewhat lower than the price originally offered by the company. However, the company up front has established the negotiation table. A manager should be wary of anchors in negotiations. Individuals instinctively stay with what seems familiar. To protect their egos from damage, individuals avoid changing the status quo, even in the face of early predictions that change will be safer. Quite often in business, making an incorrect change tends to be punished much more severely than doing nothing. Managers can avoid this trap by first thinking about their objectives and goals when preparing to make a decision. The sunk cost trap is also known as the justify past actions trap. Whenever an individual has invested time, money, or other resources in a decision, or whenever their personal reputation is at stake, they find it much more difficult to change their decision or course of action. A manager can help themselves and their subordinates to make better decisions by setting an example of admitting mistakes in their choices and changing course. The confirming evidence bias effects, where the managers go to collect data to reinforce a current stance or perspective and how they interpret the facts received. It then leads them to give too much weight to supporting information and opinions and too little to those that are conflicting. To avoid this trap, managers should have someone play devil's advocate or build counter arguments against themselves. Because the first step in the problem solving process is identifying and defining the problem, this trap can be especially dangerous. This trap is also perilous as it can lead to managers bringing other traps into the process. To avoid this trap, a manager should find ways to restate the problem or situation presented to them in their own way and take the opportunity to see it from different sides in order to envision various outcomes. The next three traps are based on the ability of a manager to estimate and forecast uncertain events. The overconfidence trap involves managers who are overly confident about their ability to predict. Ironically, research has found a positive relationship between overconfidence and task difficulty. In other words, the harder the task, the more people are apt to make decisions with confidence, almost as self justification. Confidence trap occurs when managers are overly cautious or prudent in forecasting, adjusting forecasts or estimates just to be on the safe side, looking for the worst case scenario and making decisions based upon that scenario. This can be just as damaging as being overconfident. Recallability trap represents an association bias. Well, it worked before mentality. Managers get caught up in the past and predict the future based upon past experiences which left a strong impression. When faced with high stakes decisions, managers tend to adjust their estimates or forecasts just to be on the safe side. Although managers find that it is often easier to make decisions alone, they also find that decisions made by oneself are often not the best decisions. However, the type of group involvement should be determined by the quality of the decisions needed, the amount of information available, and the degree of group acceptance needed for success. The amount of subordinate or group involvement in the decision making process is referred to as decision participation. The leader may follow one of four decision making styles when involving the group in the decision. In the autocratic style, the manager makes the decision without consulting with others. In the consultative style, the manager or leader obtains suggestions and ideas from the team members, but then makes the decision, which may or may not reflect the team members' influence. The joint decision style, also sometimes called the democratic style, involves the manager sharing the problem with the relevant team members as a group. Together, they generate and evaluate alternatives and attempt to reach an agreement on a solution. The manager's role is much like that of a chairperson. The manager or leader does not try to influence the group to adopt a solution and is willing to accept and implement any solution that has the support of the entire group. In the last style, delegation, the manager turns the problem over to the group and lets them generate and evaluate alternatives in an attempt to reach an agreement on a solution without any leader involvement. When they reach an agreement, they tell the leader what their solution is and then together begin the process of implementation. Approaches to problem solving and process improvement, such as the Shoe-Hart cycle of management, Lean, and Six Sigma, have common roots and overlapping principles. The roots of process improvement can be traced back to Walter Shoe-Hart, who developed the concept of statistical process control to aid a manager in making scientific, efficient, economical decisions. Additionally, Shoe-Hart conceived the Shoe-Hart cycle of management process based on the traditional scientific method to examine processes and remove undesirable causes and their effects. Both the Lean and the Six Sigma methodologies have shown that dramatic improvements in cost, quality, and time can be obtained by focusing on process improvement, whereas Six Sigma is focused on reducing variation and improving process capability by following a problem solving approach using statistical tools. Lean is primarily concerned with eliminating waste and improving flow. Two-heart cycle is a continuous, circular process which includes the four steps: plan, do, check, act. The next group slides will describe the components of each step. Step 1. Plan. The team must spend sufficient effort to understand the steps in the process and the causes of the problem. By describing the process, reviewing available data, and identifying the customers, the team begins to understand the process to be studied. Rather than relying on hunches or historical data, the team develops skills in data collection and analysis to illuminate the root causes of problems and to identify solutions that are meaningful to the customer. It is necessary to plot the process out on a process flow diagram. The process is then tracked on a flowchart form. A flowchart will help to determine the appropriate sequence and to determine what training and resources are needed and which people need to be involved. Figure 5-2 illustrates a flowchart process used in a laboratory. Once the process is mapped out, the cause of the problem is then explored through brainstorming and a tool called a fishbone diagram. This allows the team to see all of the factors that might affect the process. The fishbone diagram is an effective method for studying the process and for planning. It is a pictorial list of the factors with branches representing the main categories of potential causes of problems. Typical categories include people, methods, equipment and materials, and environment. Step 2. Do. In this step, the individuals responsible for implementation need to know what the goal of this change is, how they impact the implementation process, and receive training in the process. In the do step, the hypothesis that was developed is tried out. A solution is determined and implemented. The team tries out the solution in a limited way to be sure that it works. The question to be asked is, did the solution work as intended or does it need revision? Step 3, check. The results of the improvement effort are measured in this step. This gives the team a chance to see if the correct components of the process were measured. The team tests the hypothesis by collecting data as they did earlier in the processes. The results are monitored against the original data to ascertain if the desired outcome is achieved. Step 4, act. If the results showed the expected improvement, the team should standardize and document all actions with the intention of making the changes permanent. When the team is satisfied with the results, the solution is implemented permanently in all areas where it is relevant. Periodically, the process is monitored to ensure that the root cause does not reoccur and to examine other opportunities for improvement. It is important that the team returns to the customers and obtain continuous feedback on the process and how the change is working. This methodology focuses on reducing errors in improving safety. Lean is basically a set of techniques used to manage a work environment by eliminating waste, organizing the workplace, streamlining procedures, and establishing clear visual standards. Lean is a descriptive process that uses less of everything: space, time, investment in equipment, inventory, and staffing resources. Lean's five principles which guide the implementation of lean techniques include: identify value, map the value stream, create flow, establish pool, and seek perfection. Identify value. Specify what creates value from the customer's perspective. Map the value stream. Identify all the steps along the process chain, eliminating, whenever possible, those steps that do not create value. Create flow. Make the process flow so the product or service will flow smoothly toward the customer. Establish pool. Introduce a continuous flow of events between all steps of the process where possible. Seek perfection. Begin the process again and continue it until a state of perfection is reached in which perfect value is created with no waste. According to Nelson, these are the four tactics that are essential to removing the waste and establishing a lean laboratory: value stream mapping, 5S workplace organization, visual workplace, and work cell specimen processing. Value stream mapping is an early step that provides an overall assessment of the process. The mapping should be carried out as a unified team, which will increase the buy-in for the improved process. This slide shows the 3 steps that must be taken. To develop future state maps, it is important that the necessary stakeholders for each process are involved: those who work throughout the process, as well as those involved with its input and output. 5S workplace organization tactic emphasizes the maintenance of an orderly workplace. The 5 workplace practices used in this organization originate from Japanese words. The practices include siri, sort, sorting. Example, proper arrangement of all items, storage, equipment, tools, inventory, and traffic. Seton, set or simplify. Orderliness. Example, determine the best place to keep the items that are used regularly. Say so, shine, cleanliness. Example, keep the work area clean. Return items that were used during the day to their proper location. Seiketsu, standardize. Example, make things common and consistent where possible. Sitsuke, sustain or self-discipline. Example, make a habit of maintaining this system. cues such as labels, signs, or colors are used to reduce the amount of wasted time. These cues are vital to sustaining the lean practices. They ensure that the improvements are clearly visible, easily understood, and adhered to by all employees. Physical or logical layout of all testing and processing equipment, technicians, machines, and materials through which a specimen flows. Work cells minimizes movement, reduce batch sizes, decrease setup time for testing, improve lab safety, and standardize work processes with visual cues. Six Sigma DMAIC, as does the PDCA cycle, refers to a data-driven quality strategy for improving processes and is an integral part of the Six Sigma Quality Initiative. DMAIC is an acronym for five interconnected phases: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Each step in the cyclical DMAIC process is required to ensure the best possible results. 1. Defining the project goals and customer, both internal and external deliverables. The process to be improved must be determined by mapping the process flow. In step 2, the method to measure the core business process involved is developed. Step 3 analyzes and determines the root cause of the defects. Step 4 in the Six Sigma methodology is similar to the do and check steps in the Schuhart cycle. Finally, step 5, control future process performance, is basically the act step of the Schuhart cycle. The improvements are institutionalized through the modification of systems and structures in this final step. Data analysis is an essential part of any problem-solving team. Problem areas are identified and useful solutions are determined based upon data collected and analyzed. By the team focusing on the processes used in a laboratory environment, a system to address a situation or problem can be created that allows everyone involved to feel like they have some control. Further, individuals involved in the process will feel a responsibility for the success of the laboratory as well as for their own role in the process. Provides an opportunity to identify where improvement will be most beneficial and is called benchmarking. Both quantitative and qualitative performance measures can be used to benchmark an organization. Some examples of performance indicators that benchmarking practitioners can use depending on the needs of their specific benchmarking task are listed in Table 5-1 on page 134 of your textbook. Brainstorming is a popular technique for enlisting the creative thinking. The objective is quantity, not quality of ideas. In the clarification phase, the team reviews the list to be sure everyone understands each item. Discussion is scheduled for a later time. In the evaluation phase, the team examines the list to remove duplicative, non-relevant, or forbidden items. A scatter diagram is a plot of one variable versus another to see if there is any relationship between the two. Variable A is plotted on one axis and variable B is plotted on the other axis. When there is no correlation, no apparent relationship between the two variables is found. If positive correlation is found, there is a defined, predictable relationship between the two variables. An increase in one variable is accompanied by a predictable increase in the other variable. This figure illustrates no correlation and positive and negative correlation. Pareto charts help to identify major factors and distinguish between the vital few causes and the potentially less significant ones. They are used to rank order causes from most to least significant. Such a graphical technique is based on the Pareto principle, which states that just a few of the causes often account for most of the effect. It is often referred to as the 80 to 20 rule. 80% of the problems can be attributed to 20% of the causes. The Pareto chart displays in decreasing order the relative contribution of each cause to the total problem. Relative contribution may be based on the number of occurrences, the cost associated with each cause, or another measure of impact on the problem. PMI is a valuable development of the pros and cons technique which has been used for centuries. PMI is a basic decision-making tool. In the column underneath the plus heading, write down all the positive points of taking the action. Underneath the minus heading, write down all the negative effects. In the interesting column, write down the extended implications of taking the action, whether positive or negative. Scoring your PMI table, you may be able to make a decision from the table alone. Refer to Table 5-2 on page 137 of your textbook for an example of a PMI table. The nodes are of two types. The first is a rectangle that represents the decision to be made. The branches emanating from decision nodes are the alternative choices with which the manager is faced. Only one alternative can be implemented. The second type of node is a circle. Circles represent chance nodes. That is, the alternatives emanating from chance nodes have some element of uncertainty as to whether or not they will occur. The primary benefit of a decision tree is that it provides a visual representation of the choices facing the manager. Such a graphical technique is used to sort out and relate the interactions among the factors affecting a process. A well-detailed cause and effect diagram is shaped like a fishbone. Refer to Figure 5-8 on page 138 of your textbook. Ideally, precise, in-depth economic analysis should be performed by examining the cash flow impacts of each alternative, taking into account the time value of money. A standard work chart or spaghetti diagram is tracking, on paper, the path of the person or persons performing the process tasks. Called a spaghetti diagram because of the lines drawn to trace the operation sequence. This step-by-step documentation is a visual creation of the flow and describes the actual activities. Distance from the last step, estimated task time, observations, and return rate. These are just a few of the many analytical tools available to teams and managers to detail out processes to make an informed decision. The value of the tool lies in the ability of the team to look at various pieces of data in different perspectives and frames of reference. This lecture has covered problem solving and decision making, which are important functions of a laboratory manager. to ensure the smooth operation of the laboratory and to ensure quality patient care. Managers should identify the problem, analyze it using data gathered, establish criteria for making a decision, and develop alternatives. And finally, implement the solution. Involving individuals in the problem solving process can be important to the buy in of the final decision.